The focus will be the truth about sex. Yes. Let's not be scared about that word. The truth about sex. If you're not teaching your kids about sex, who is? Is the question. Who? Somebody will be teaching your kids about it, but if it's not you, who is? Sex is too important to God to leave it to culture and schools. Let's keep that in mind. And let me tell you guys something. Sex is not a sin. It is not a sin. It was created by God to be enjoyed between a husband and wife, male and female. And when it's done right, it will bring many blessings to us, to our families, and humanity. This is the perfect design from God. Since the beginning, and especially nowadays, the enemy has been trying to distort, disfigure God's perfect design for us, his children. And I want to mention just two verses or two parts of the Bible. There's so many, only two or three here. Adam, let's think about Adam. Adam was alone in the Garden of Eden, and God said, what did he say in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18 to 24? It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper who is right for him. I will make a helper suitable for him. And who did he create? Eve. All right? That's how a family starts. The Lord created Eve, and that's how, and told them to procreate and to multiply on earth. Also in verse 24 says, Genesis 2:24 says, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh, one family. Those are our principles, our values, right? If you think about the Noah's Ark, the Bible says in Genesis chapter 7, verse 8 and 9, that all the animals enter the ark in pairs, male and female, because God wanted procreation. God wanted multiplication in the earth. And lastly, if we, when we read the book of Song of Songs, and it's clear there that sex is pure, good, and it deepens the relationship. It's not just physical, it's emotional and spiritual. And the enemy knows this and can use it to attack these aspects of our lives. But there's rules. And I'm going to leave it up to this point, right? So this upcoming conference is about it's about parents as well. It's for everybody, for parents, youth leaders, young people, grandparents, right? The truth about sex. And I would like to call our brother, one of the speakers is here, our brother Phil, to come. He's going to give us more details about the conference. Feel free to, if you have any questions after the service, feel free to talk to him and ask more questions. Good morning, brother.
Good morning, Pastor. Thank you so much, Pastor. You know,
okay, let me turn this on.
Great, thank you so much, Pastor. So many of you know me. I've been coming here for a year and a half. I love this place. You know why? Because Pastor and the leadership here aren't afraid to talk about difficult things that we need to know about to guide us to make the right decisions. So I'm excited to be here. Pastor just described God's blessing. his blessing of sex when practiced within the guidelines of a committed, lifelong married relationship. And if you examine God's gift in the Old Testament and New Testament, you get a wonderful picture that Pastor started to describe. You get this wonderful picture of God's creation for mankind, a wonderful picture of his foundational principles of life. But Satan cannot create. What he does is he will take God's creation, use man's fallen nature, he will crumple, distort, twist that picture into a hypersexualized message that is going to, designed to, steal, kill, and destroy. People often ask me, Phil, how did you get passionate about this issue? I spent most of my career as an educator. And in 1996, the sex ed curriculum was starting to change. And we were going from an abstinence-based approach, which taught kids the risks and said, it's better to wait until you get into a committed, lifelong relationship. But it went from that to teaching about the sexual rights, the rights to be sexually engaged at any age, and we'll help you reduce the risk. And we here in the city of Hamilton and across Ontario have been providing our kids with condoms since 1997. So the program shifted from that healthy, abstinence-based approach, focus on health, to sexual rights in 1997. I was concerned, and I researched, what is this based on? There was no credible evidence. None. So I hosted meetings here in Stony Creek, 1997, and in Hamilton, and we just brought people in to let them know what was happening. And the response at that time was very positive. Over the years, let's see if we get this going. Oh, it's on. There we go. Over the years, that has grown into a charity called Peace Education Services, with a vision to equip parents to guide and support their children toward optimal sexual health, protecting their current and future well-being in a culture that sexualizes children. That's our mission. Oh, there we go. What do we mean by optimal health? When we talk about optimal health, we're talking about physical health, mental health, emotional, social, relational health, and yes, spiritual health as well. Over the years, the Lord has opened doors for us and has used us to present, even as expert witnesses in provincial and state legislatures in the United States, to deliver research-based, biblically aligned sexual health curriculum here in Canada, and we even have major programs operating in Hawaii in the United States. And we've trained 80 sexual risk avoidance educators in Canada and the United States. And the Hawaii programs have been so successful that the US government even gives us funding because we are helping at-risk homeless kids that have dropped out of school to change their lives by teaching them about sexuality and how to avoid at-risk situations. What we find is when we teach those kids, and this is the curriculum that we use, when we teach those kids the truth about this activity and how to avoid at-risk activities in sexuality, they not only avoid the at-risk, the sex risks, they avoid drugs, they avoid alcohol, they avoid other at-risks. So this applies in many at-risk situations. When we share with parents, we often use this analogy. What is our goal? What is our purpose as parents? We have to get our kids from the island of childhood to the shoreline of adulthood, where they're going to begin achieving their goals. That can be a career, that can be family, that can be spiritual goals, that can be at home. But we have to get them across the risky waters of the youth years, where sex, drugs, alcohol can negatively impact not just their lives as teens, but it's been proven can negatively impact life goal achievement. When we talk about risks, sexual risks, everybody with youth, everybody thinks about the physical risks, pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. Well, our culture tells us, no problem, we'll provide you with condoms and you can take care of those risks. The reality is, it doesn't take care of them. It does reduce, but it does not prevent. As a matter of fact, for example, herpes. A condom only reduces the risk by 30%. That's all. We don't tell the kids that. Even if a child does not become pregnant or contract a sexually transmitted infection, there are many other social and emotional risks. Early sexual activity leads to a sequence of failed relationships, which often continues into adulthood. It leads to poor family relations as a child, which also continues often into adulthood. Reduced academic achievement, even if the child doesn't become pregnant. Just being sexually active. What happens? Your focus is on the sex, on the relationships, on the problems, not on what you need to be focusing on at that time. And the research proves that youth sexual activity actually leads to reduced earning potential in life. Increased depression and suicide. Boys who are sexually active are 8 times more likely to commit suicide. Increased exposure to drugs, crime, and sex trafficking. These are negative, lifelong consequences, and the social emotional risks are not prevented with a condom. So if we're going to guide our kids, what are the approaches? There's 2 general approaches. The one I mentioned earlier, sexual risk avoidance, that's the term now. It's the new abstinence approach. And basically it says this: youth sex is a risk. We need to treat it as a risk. We need to teach our kids about the risks and help them to develop the skills to avoid those risks. The second approach is the comprehensive sex ed approach. And it says, oh, come on, Phil, people are sexual from birth. Youth have sexual rights, all ages, all orientations, and we need to let them know that. And to help reduce the risk, we're going to provide them with condoms. The goal of comprehensive sex education, and this is the foundation of our culture and the foundation of our sex ed curriculum in schools. It's being driven by Planned Parenthood, and the goal is to equip youth to have satisfying sexual relations and reduce risk. That's the goal. That's not Phil talking. That is the stated goal in the international guidelines. How does CSE get into our schools? Sometime back years ago, you had protests outside Queen's Park, etc. Everybody's blaming Kathleen Wynne. Goes much deeper than Kathleen Wynne. She was just a tool at the time. Okay? It begins with Planned Parenthood, and some of you may go, I've heard of that, but I don't know, what do they do? Planned Parenthood that advises the United Nations and the World Health Organization. Then, you got to know this though. This was the goal of Planned Parenthood, and it's stated publicly in their documents. The goal is to be ready as educators to help young people obtain sex before marriage. That was their goal in the 50s and the 60s, and they restate it in different ways, so it's not quite as obvious, but that's the same goal. Okay, they're advising United Nations and World Health Organization. The United Nations then creates the policies that They're signed on countries then sign on to, like Canada. And then Canada takes that information down to CCAN here in Canada, Sexual Information Education Council of Canada. Wait a minute. What's that? How did CCAN get created? Well, here you go. CCAN was created by Planned Parenthood in 1964 it actually wasn't Planned Parenthood alone, it was Planned Parenthood and Playboy magazine. And Hugh Hefner said, we're going to use this as a pamphleteer to change culture. So CCAN then creates the sexual education guidelines for Canada, and then the provinces take that and turn that into curriculum. Okay? So, what are the World Health Organization standards that they're pushing on us? First of all, preschool. Yes, preschool. Kids need to be informed about, early childhood self-stimulation. The right to explore their gender identities in preschool. JK to grade 1, labeling genitalia. I have no problem with kids knowing the appropriate names. I do have a problem with that being in a mixed class where we have posters on the wall, the kids are putting labels on, and yes, they even have plush toy genitalia that fits inside one another. What happens? I've spoken in BC, in Manitoba, in Alberta, in Ontario, and I've asked the teachers, when this all started happening in 2016-17, what was the impact on your kids? And the Christian teachers said, it led to increased investigation on the playground and sexual activity in grades 1 and 2. Grade 1, the children need to consolidate their gender identity. By the end of grade 1, decide, are you a boy, are you a girl, or something else? By the end of grade 1. Grade 1 to grade 3, they need to be informed again. And the issue of self-stimulation, I'm going to say the word masturbation, goes through the curriculum every single grade, because that's how we reduce their modesty, that's how we increase their interest in sexual activity. Talks about the sexual rights of children, and they need to know about sexual orientation and gender identity. Our premier said, we're going to take sexual orientation, gender identity, when they revise the curriculum, and move it to later grades. Well, guess what they did? Instead, they took the terms out, but in grade 2, it says, we need to investigate the way the visible and invisible are invisible and visible differences. That's another way of opening the door to sexual orientation, gender identity. So they took the terms out, but the door is still there and it's still covered. Let's have a look at what it looks like in the classroom.
A family can be made up in many different ways.
It's called SOGI, for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identification, a curriculum that teaches public school students across Canada to celebrate the homosexual lifestyle and that gender is fluid. In other words, your gender is not dependent on what parts you were born with, but rather what you feel like in the moment.
There's people that are boys, there's people that are girls, there are people whose gender might be a little bit of both or might even be neither.
Lessons include books about transgender children, such as 10,000 Dresses, and songs like The Rainbow Song.
Gender won't decide the choices we make. Some boys like dressing up, some girls like catching snakes.
The SOGI curriculum started in British Columbia in 2016 and is quickly spreading throughout Canada.
I just thought, who decided that this was okay to teach our children?
Author and inspirational speaker Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson is a leading voice against the SOGI curriculum.
And we are seeing the results of that now, because some kids are reacting very emotionally and saying, and they're in fear. Will I suddenly struggle with feeling like a different gender inside of my body? No.
Carrie Simpson of Culture Guard, another leading opponent, calls the curriculum nothing short of child abuse.
All those beautiful qualities that make young girls, beautiful girls and women, are being basically vilified. The things that make our boys boys are being, taken from them. So things of equating young men to being strong protectors is something that's now evil.
But Morgan Auger, a transsexual and supporter, claims it's about acceptance, not indoctrination.
The idea is to teach kids that there are gay kids and there are trans kids and there are trans parents and gay parents in our society, and everybody is wanted and desired. After all, that's what our Human Rights Code says, and it's the role of schools to teach the following of our laws, right?
Simpson disagrees, saying she sees Soji's real goal as
altering our culture from a heteronormative society into one where anything goes, no boundaries, no values, no morals. It's a hedonistic cult, basically what they're implying.
Another blaring example, drag queen story time. It's happening in Canada and America, where some public schools and libraries invite drag queens, some dressed like horned demons, to read to young children.
And it's a social deconstructionist agenda. They're using children, little 5-year-olds, to accomplish this. And parents are waking up and saying no.
When asked about parents' rights, Auger says,
well, actually, in Canada, parents' rights are limited and children's rights are put ahead. So the child has the right to be protected from the parents when the parents behave badly.
Unfortunately, though, this is the truth in our curriculum. School board policies. First of all, when kids are going through puberty, you may or may not remember, but particularly today, there's a lot of confusion and conflict. And a lot of kids wonder about their gender, they wonder about their orientation, they wonder about a lot of things. And our school board policies say this: if a child comes to you and says, I think I'm a girl, and if they're a biological boy, they think they're transgendered, the policy states this: the principal must work with the LGBT agencies in the community and develop a gender-affirming care transition plan for that child. Change the name, change the pronouns used, change the washroom that they use, change the change rooms that they use, etc., and don't tell the parents. The parents have the child has the autonomous right to decide on their gender, their orientation, and yes, their sexual behavior. And if they are engaging in serious at-risk activity, the school cannot tell the parents. So, oh, wait a minute. Oh, I'm sorry, I went ahead. There we go. Well, too far. Let's see if we can go back to where we were. So we looked at the primary grades. What I'd like to do next is let's look at the grades 4 to 7. What do the World Health Standards say? And how is this changing or affecting curriculum? Sorry about there we go. From grades 4 to 7, kids need to know, they're in the knowledge area, the different sexual behaviors. Yes? We need to talk about ways in which you can demonstrate your affection for somebody. Everything from holding hands to anal intercourse, oral, etc. We need to talk about, they need to be informed about sexual orientation, what it is, and gender identity, and to be affirmed and encouraged to consider if they may have a gender identity that's different and what it is. Again, the issue of self-stimulation and pleasure is a focus in grades 4 to 7. They need to learn the skills of condom use, consent for sexual activity, and yes, we talk about negotiating sexual activity. Oh, I don't like that. How about this? And the ability to make decisions whether to have sex or not. Whoops. The resources. The resources many parents have gone to school boards and complained about because they meet the legal definition of pornography and child porn. School boards refuse to do anything about it because they say, no, this is different. These are educational materials to teach kids about sex. So it's not pornography. What are the results? We've been teaching this approach, comprehensive sex ed, since 1997. It started and it's been ramping up since then. Has it led to better health? Let's look at the chlamydia infection rates. Chlamydia is the most commonly reported sexually transmitted infection. We look at those rates. The bottom line is the national average. But when we look at the 15-year-olds, 15 to 19-year-olds, and the 20 to 24-year-olds, it's a much greater increase. You have to ask the question, these increased sexually transmitted infection rates, does this mean that sexual activity is increased? It's a good indicator. Are you sexually active? This is a Canadian Pediatric Society report. When it comes to grade 9 students, 14-year-olds, 9% have engaged in intercourse. That's the blue. The orange, oral sex. The green is deep kissing. The purple, 61, and the blue, sorry, I can't read it from here. I got to turn around. 61 and 53% is sexual touch above the waist and below the waist under the clothes. That's 14-year-olds. As they get older, yes, it increases. So yes, our kids are engaging in at-risk activity. And we have to be concerned. You might say, oh, but Phil, intercourse, 24%, grade 11, that means 76% aren't. That's true. But you still transfer STIs through other forms of sexual activity, including mutual manipulation. Results. And often people in church say, oh, come on, Phil, our kids go to church. They wouldn't do this. Research shows sexual activity for church kids is just slightly below the no-faith church groups. And I took one slide out to save time, but I think it's important. The evangelical Protestant kids, once they've made the mistake, the research shows when it comes to 4 or more partners, they have a 50% greater risk. In other words, the no-faith group is here. The evangelical Protestant kids, when it comes to 4 or more partners, are much higher than the no-faith group. Why? There are ideas about that, but we don't have time for that right now. Okay, what about sexual orientation and drug use? Is there a relationship? Yes. When it comes to heterosexual kids engage in drugs at the rate of 5%. This is the 5%. So 5% of our heterosexual kids engage in drugs at least once in a year. If you look at those that are mostly heterosexual, bisexual, or lesbian, it's 3 and 4 times higher, 5 times higher. And I think we need to be particularly concerned because when it comes to girls, look at the bisexual, they're always higher when it comes to abusing drugs in other orientations. Bisexual, 27% of girls who identify as bisexual have engaged in using drugs. At-risk activity. Next, what about depression? What about suicide rates? When it comes to heterosexual, you look at this, heterosexual youth have a 4.6% of them in their lifetime will have attempted suicide. When it comes to the other orientations and identities, it's 3, 4, 5, 10 times higher. Do we tell the kids this? No. No. Does comprehensive sex ed reduce teen sex, pregnancy, and STIs? There was a formal report done. It's a peer-reviewed study. They looked at 103 comprehensive sex ed studies, and the research showed, the conclusion was, comprehensive sex ed is ineffective in the US, Canada, and international classrooms, and sexual risk avoidance looks very promising. That's led to a slight change in the States. They're putting money into sexual risk avoidance. Here in Canada, we're going full bore on comprehensive sex ed. I can't get politicians to even listen. Who should be guiding our kids? We're talking about culture, we're talking about schools, we're talking about guiding our kids. Who should be guiding our kids? Well, there are three sources. We've got secular society, we've got family, and we've got faith communities. The research shows the most effective agents of influence guiding our kids in the right direction are parents and faith communities. But they tell us they don't feel equipped. What do the kids tell us? This is a Barna study. This is not Phil talking. This is a Barna study. 40% and they surveyed sexually active kids. 40% of those sexually active kids said they felt that their sex ed classes actually pressured them to have sex. The majority said, I regret my sexual activity, but I didn't know I could say no. I thought it was just expected. I thought it was normal. 87% said they wish their parents had been equipped to better guide them. And 75% of this, and this is not a church group, these are sexually active teens, broad country study, said we believe the church should play a greater role. I think the kids are giving us our marching orders. But before I go on, I want to give you one last piece of information. I just came across this 2 days ago. This is a Gallup poll survey, and it investigates, it surveyed adults across the country about their self-identification as LGBTQ. So do you identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, any one of those other orientations or gender identities other than heterosexual? When we look at the bottom line, the silent generation, those born before 1945, a few of us here, 1.1% say they relate to that. The baby boomers, my generation, 2.3%. Let's go to the millennials, second from the top. Those born between 1981 and 1996, 9.8% of them say they are. We go to the Generation Z, those born between 97 and 2012, 22.3% say they are living a lifestyle, they relate to a lifestyle that's not consistent with Scripture. I ask the question, is God concerned? Should we be concerned about their eternal lives? Should we be concerned about their health? Should we be concerned about their emotional? We showed you the emotional state for these kids is worse. The risk rate is worse. And then I asked the question, what about the next generation? And I did the math on this. If the trend continues, my grandchildren and your grandchildren, when they become adults, young adults, 56% of them, more than half the population, will identify as people of faith. How should we respond? Should we be concerned about their eternal lives? So, next question. How would God want us to respond? For the most part, many of us have been doing this, sitting with our heads in the sand. Scripture says, train up a child in the way he should go. So, with all this in mind,
parents and church leadership, are you concerned about the influence our hypersexualized culture is having on our children's understanding of sex and sexuality? You may not realize it, but the research proves that the most powerful agents of influence over a child's sexual decisions are you, parents and church leadership. But if you don't actively engage in teaching your kids about sex, they default to absorbing information from our culture's explicit messaging that encourages sexual activity. And research proves that youth sexual activity is connected to negative, often lifelong consequences.
We understand the challenges that you face in addressing this delicate topic. That is why we developed Family Foundations, a training program designed to equip parents and church leaders with the knowledge and tools to confidently navigate the conversations about sex, sexuality, and healthy relationships with their children. As a concerned mom, I understand the overwhelm of addressing these issues. Family Foundations has been invaluable in providing a toolkit that empowers parents to take on the leadership role, guiding their children through the complexities of sexuality in a world filled with conflicting messages.
Parents and church leaders, don't let our hypersexualized culture be the default authority. Let's take charge and shape our child's understanding. Help them to protect their future by making healthy, biblically aligned life decisions. Become the primary influencer in your child's sexual education journey. Attend the upcoming training. I look forward to seeing you.
And there's the training, just a little bit of background. And in front of you, there are brochures in the pews. Oops. Family Foundations. For the past 2 years, I've been working with an international group that came to me and said, can we work together to develop a parent program? It is research-based. It leads to decisions that are healthy, biblically aligned life choices. And it covers the topics that we need to know about. So it covers puberty and why kids get confused through this time and how to guide them. Our Body Speaks, God's design for sex, the risks of youth sex, social media and pornography, and how to guide our kids through that. Sexual orientation, gender identity, comparing the approaches to sex ed, and effective communication. How do we communicate with our kids? And lastly, now that we are engaging with our kids, etc., what's the biblical strategy to positively influence outside of church, but to influence culture? The authors of this group, Lori Kuykendall. Lori is from Texas. She has a master's of public health. She has reached over 500,000 kids in her 25 years. She is currently, her official title, she is currently she's the Senior Global Health Educator Consultant for the International Institute for Women's Health. She is leading a team that is writing and piloting optimal sexual health curriculum for Guatemala and for Uganda. And there are 36 other countries waiting in the wings, once this is proven, to embrace that to help their kids. Then Dave Woolweber. Dave, he's my buddy. He works with me in Hawaii. And when I went there in 2013, despite there was no income, he jumped in with both feet. He's totally, under his management, the programs have grown to the point where we have 48 trained facilitators, but the demand is exceeding our capacity because it's so successful. He just completed a 10-day tour in the Philippines where he reached 500 parents and 100 youth. And Dave's mantra, I think this is important for us. His mantra is this: following God's design for health and for sex and healthy relationships leads to whole individuals and committed marriages. The committed marriages lead to strong families. Strong families lead to blessed nations, and blessed generations and blessed generations result in strong nations. And another person that's going to be at the conference is Liz Milliken. She's a registered psychotherapist with a specialty in gender identity, and she's going to be there to help answer your questions if you're having difficulty with your kids. Okay? And that's the conference. Who should be there? As Pastor said, this is open to everyone, all adults. Sometimes people might say, but my child's only 3 years old. You're better to start early than start late. We have resources that start at age 3, before I was born. And this is published by Nav Press, and it's just, Mommy, Daddy, tell me the story of me. Where did I come from? What's God's design for me? But if you haven't started, and don't say, oh, my kids are 14, I may be too late. When we're investing, if you haven't started early, when's the next best time to start? Now. So start now, okay? You must register on Eventbrite. The information's in the brochures. And also at the back, there are invitation cards. You're welcome to take as many as you want. Please, our goal is to influence culture. Invite as many people as possible to the event. Thank you very much, Pastor.